ఈ వీడియోకి బెస్ట్ రిజల్ట్స్ కావాలి అంటే ఈ వీడియోని 1.5x కానీ 2x కానీ స్పీడ్లోని చూడండి. Before you jump into the question, click on the link below, answer it for yourself, and then come back to the video. All right, I hope you're done. Let's begin. For early post-colonial literature, post-colonial is what it is, after colonialism. So the era of colonialism was over. That is, well, towards the mid-1900s, right? 1940s, 1950s, 1930s, 1960s even, for some countries. The world of the novel was often the nation. Post-colonial novels were usually concerned with national questions. Sometimes the whole story of the novel was taken as an allegory of the nation. Allegory of the nation, the story is like it is representing the nation, it is a story of the nation, or it is the nation itself as a character. It's a literary device, right? Whether India or Tanzania. This was most important for supporting anti-colonial nationalism, but could also be limiting, land-focused and inward-looking. Now, that's a very, very good paragraph, and we will quickly summarize that. What it says is, post-colonial novels had some focus. And what was that? They were focused on this is supposed to be a camera. And they were focused on that because anti-colonial nationalism was required. But at the same time, it was limiting, it was land focused and inward looking. And I'll just write that, inward looking. Now, this is a characteristic, either you don't make note of it, it's still fine. It's a characteristic, but then the overarching idea here is that post-colonial literature had a certain way of looking at things, is what the author said. So most probably the author is going to go forward and said, hey, someone else did something else, I did something else, there's some other perspective out there, things have changed, one of these two. My new book, so I'm automatically expecting that he's going to change the whole narrative now. Writing Ocean Worlds explores another kind of world of the novel. See, he's changed the world. Not the village or nation, but the Indian Ocean world. So he's not focusing on the nation, he's focusing on the Indian Ocean. Great rhyme scheme though. The book describes a set of novels in which the Indian Ocean is at the center of the story. So now the nation is not the center of the story, but the Indian Ocean is the center of the story. That means it's more than just one country. It focuses on the novelists Amitav Ghosh, Abdul Razak Gurnah, Lindsay, Colin and Joseph Conrad centered the Indian Ocean world in the majority of their novels. So the book the author has written is focusing on other authors who have written about the Indian Ocean, or rather who have centered their novels around the Indian Ocean. Cool. This is like a, interstellar kind of a thing. Author writing about other authors. Let's see. Their work reveals a world that is outward looking. Earlier it was inward looking, now it is outward looking, full of movement, border crossing, south-south interconnection. That means inward looking, the post-colonial literature up there was everything opposite of this. That is, it was inward looking, it had no movement, it had no south-south interconnection, maybe north-south interconnection. That is what it was talking about. By the way, what is the south-south? South-south here is, there's this terminology called global south and global north, if you're aware. So global south is talking about the southern hemisphere, because most of the third world countries kind of are found in the southern hemisphere. That is why it is a south-south interconnection. They are all very different, from colonially inclined to radically anti-capitalist, but together draw on and shape a wider sense of the Indian Ocean space through themes, images, metaphors, language. So they're all different. But what is common amongst all of them? What is common indeed is that they all focus on one. South-South, they all focus primarily on the Indian Ocean space. So what we have here is this new kind of novels, absolutely opposite to post-colonial literature, focused on Indian Ocean. That is what it says. Let's look at the third paragraph. The Indian Ocean world is a term used to describe the very long-lasting connections among the coasts of East Africa, the Arab coast, and South and East Asia. These connections were made possible by the geography of the Indian Ocean. For much of history, travel by sea was much easier than by land, which meant that port cities very far apart were often very easily connected, more easily connected to each other than to much closer inland cities. Now, what is this necessarily saying? You just look at this part where the claim is, he says it is describing connections amongst those particular nations. And why was that? Why it was possible not because of the geography or its proximity, that is closeness to each other, but it was possible because they were well connected by sea, the Indian Ocean, and hence the Indian Ocean in some ways becomes the hero. It becomes the hero. So in the third paragraph, he talks about that. We'll finish the rest of it. For much of history, travel by sea was much easier than by land, which meant that port cities very far apart were often more easily connected to each other than to much closer inland cities. Historical and archaeological evidence suggests that what we now call globalization first appeared in the Indian Ocean. Oh, so globalization appeared in the Indian Ocean even before anything else. It's kind of, counterintuitive, right? Globalization is seemingly like a, Western concept that has been imported, LPG and all of that. Anywho, this is the interconnected oceanic world referenced and produced by the novels in my book. So, what does he say? Each of these books depicts the Indian Ocean as a, let's say, happening place So earlier novels were looking at the nation alone, and then now the author is looking at novels which are not really looking at just the nation, but it is looking at the Indian Ocean as a whole world, and then themes have been explored with Indian Ocean as the focus. And it says the Indian Ocean is where a lot of happening things happened. All right, let's see. Let's move to the next set of paragraphs here, and then we'll see what is it that we got to do. Oh no. For their part, Ghosh, Gurna, Gurna, or Colin, and even Conrad referenced a different set of histories and geographies than the ones most commonly found in fiction in English. Those are mostly centered in Europe or the US, assume a background of Christianity and whiteness, and mention places like Paris and New York. Interesting. So what the author says is these novels that I am referencing in my book are all focused on anything but English, Christian, white, male dominated stories. The novels in my book highlight instead a largely Islamic space, feature characters of color and centralize the ports of Malindi, Mombasa, Aden, Java and Bombay. It is a densely imagined, richly sensory image of a southern cosmopolitan culture which provides for an enlarged sense of place in the world. It's such a beautiful, beautiful way of doing this, right? You see, I really love this enlarged sense of place in the world. See, the focus of English literature is and has always been the white people, the western parts of it. It was based in New York or Paris. It basically ignored the presence of anything but these characteristics. So these novels that the author is having in his book, referencing in his book, have made anything which is opposite of what the Western literature said as the focus. So the focus now is anything but Christian, male, white. And this indeed gave them a larger whom. This gave the South, but here Indian Ocean, a larger part in, well, maybe history or maybe the world. Last paragraph, this remapping is particularly powerful for the representation of Africa. The author says this is particularly very important for Africa. Why? In the fiction, sailors and travelers are not all European. African as well as Indian and Arab characters are traders, nakhodas, that is captains, runaways, villains, missionaries, activists. This does not mean that the Indian Ocean, Africa is romanticized. So what it says is, Africa was given importance, sure, but it is not all romantic. Hey, guys, come on. Every time you see romantic, it doesn't mean that it is about a girlfriend and a boyfriend or a hero and a heroine. That is not what romantic is. Romanticized, what it means is it's shown in all goody-goody lenses. You know, bed of roses, beautiful, wonderful. Those emotions, when you say something is romanticized, you're looking at, probably going to Greece and you look at the Instagram pictures and you're like, oh, that is such a beautiful place. You romanticize it and then you end up there in a dingy lodge and you're like, okay, this is not what I've seen on Instagram. So romanticized is something that is put through a lens of beauty. Migration is often a matter of force. So it is not all romantic. Because there is also force. Migration, travel is portrayed as abandonment rather than adventure. Freedoms are kept from women and slavery is rife. What rife is filled with? What it does mean is that the African part of the Indian Ocean world plays an active role in its long, rich history and therefore in the part of the wider world. It's not romantic. Lots of big bad things. I don't need to remember all of that. But depicts its, and its here is Africa. Post-colonial literature or any other literature for that matter has always focused on the nation, and the English literature or the Western literature has always focused on the English white Christian missionary kind of a thing. So the author says there are other people like Ghosh, Gurna, Lindsay, whoever that is, and Conrad and other people who have written with a focus on the Indian Ocean, and the author has created a book with focus on that, on these fiction. And he says it brings relevance to this part of the world in a larger picture in the world as such. So now you get to see that even the southern hemisphere or the south-south relationships that we were talking about earlier, even the southern part, the Indian Ocean played a very important role in the evolution of the history here. All right. So, of course, what is the purpose of the author? If you ask me, the purpose of the author is to discuss as to why he has written the book. As simple as that. He's communicating to us the rationale behind him trying to document, reference novels which take the focus away from the Western thought process to probably the Indian Ocean. So he's basically telling us about his book, as simple as that. All right. So let's, given that we've discussed this at length, we'll dive into the questions. Let's begin. All right, we start with question number 1. All of the following claims contribute to the remapping discussed by the passage. So what you're looking at is a remapping. The remapping was there right here in the previous slide. Remapping as in, well, the focus being taken away from the West and being brought into the Indian Ocean part, right? The global South, as opposed to the global North, was the first center of globalization. Well, this is anything that is saying or anything that is projecting the South in a positive undertone is contributing to the remapping. So you're changing the map altogether. So this is giving global South more relevance, and hence it is not except. B. The world of early international trade and commerce was not the sole domain of the white Europeans. Absolutely. So this shows the whole story is all of these depictions. The Indian Ocean was bubbling with trade, commerce. It was not the white Europeans who did it. Again, it is putting the southern part or the Indian Ocean part in a positive light, and hence it is remapping. So it is not the except. C. Cosmopolitanism originated in the West and traveled to the East through globalization. Again, I mean, the precedence of cosmopolitanism is globalization. If globalization, as is said in the first option, started in the East, how? How is it coming from the West to East? It has gone from East to West, most probably. This is contrarian or contradictory to what the author has been saying. And hence that has to be the answer. I'll check with option D and then I'll put a tick mark against option C. D. Indian Ocean novels have gone beyond the specifics of national concerns to explore rich regional pasts. So they have gone beyond national concerns. That means, anti-colonial literature, which had nation as the focus. Here we have beyond nation as the focus, and hence, well, D is also aligned with what the author said. That leaves me with C, and C exactly is the answer because it is the exception. Okay, well, let's move to the next question. Which one of the following statements is not true about migration in the Indian Ocean world? Which one of the following statements is not true about migration in the Indian Ocean world? So one of these is not true. It's not true. A. Geographical location rather than geographical proximity determined the choice of destination for migrants. You see how, you remember in the last, in an earlier bit, we discussed about inland, despite being closer, people didn't go there, but then they traveled by sea because it was easier. This says it is not geographical proximity, but it is a geographical location, which is what it is. It is true according to the passage. B. The Indian Ocean world's migration networks were shaped by religious and commercial histories of the region. The commercial history did in fact shape the migration network, and of course the religious, because we talked about activists, we talked about missionaries, right? So both those words, if you want, you can scroll back in time or refer to the PDF. You will see this as well. So this is also true. C. The Indian Ocean world's migration networks connected the global North with the global South. No, absolutely not. See, the Indian Ocean connected South-South. You remember we read that South-South connection. It was not a North-South connection. It was not a South-North connection. It was a South-South connection. It is not true, and hence this has to be the answer. D. Migration in the Indian Ocean world was an ambivalent experience. Ambivalent is, well, dicey. It's both ways. It's that way, it's this way. It's not completely good, it's not completely bad. And the last paragraph, the author says that, right? He says, journeying or traveling is considered as abandonment, which is a bad thing. But that is also commerce, so it is a good thing as well. So ambivalent here is true, and hence that is not the answer. D. Well, the answer is C. Let's move to the next question. On the basis of the nature of the relationship between the items in each pair below. Okay, on the basis of the nature of the relationship between what? The items in each pair. So there are some pairs here, they are in some relationship. Choose the odd pair. There is one pair which is odd. Whenever there is an odd pair, it is primarily to say that it is not aligned with the passage. It's not according to the passage. Now, post-colonial novels are border crossing. Absolutely. Post-colonial novels are border crossing. We'll come back to this. Let's establish BCD as well. Post-colonial novels, anti-colonial nationalism. That's true. In the very first paragraph, we read that post-colonial novels were focused on anti-colonial nationalism because it was important for patriotism or sort. Actually, that reminds me. Border crossing was this guy, right? It was inward looking, is what we thought. So most probably A is the answer. See, Indian Ocean world, slavery, that is true. Indian Ocean world is connected to slavery. It's the last part of it, right? The last paragraph, Africa, focus on Africa. There was slavery as well. It was not just romantic. D, Indian Ocean novels are outward looking. Absolutely. So if this is outward looking, this cannot be border crossing. Get it? If this is true, this is false. If this is outward looking, that means it is border crossing. If Indian Ocean novels are border crossing, then post-colonial novels are absolutely not border crossing, and hence that is the answer. Answer for question number 3 is A. And the last question, all of the following statements, if true. Guys, come on. Remember this. It says if true. And when it says if true, what it means is you got to assume that they are true. It doesn't matter if it is true or not. It is true. It doesn't matter how much you think it is not correct. It is true. So which all of the following statements, if true, would weaken. That is, I want to cut down, break down. Not break down, but completely smash down. Weaken the passage's claim about the relationship between mainstream English language fiction and Indian Ocean novels, except you look at this, it weakens, except. So, of the 4 options, 3 options weaken, but only 1 strengthens. So, if it is strengthening, what is it that I'm looking at, right? Let's look at option A. Most mainstream English language novels have historically privileged the Christian white male experience of travel and adventure. This is in alignment with what the author is saying about the English language fiction. So it strengthens per se. Let's see. B. The depiction of Africa in most Indian Ocean novels is driven by an Orientalist imagination of its cultural crudeness. Orientalist imagination of its cultural crudeness. In the whole passage, the author says that Africa has finally found its place for the good reasons. And if the option is saying that it is only because of its cultural crudeness, that is, it's like, talking about an animal in a zoo. I'm talking about the animal in a zoo because it's exotic. Oh, it's all nice and fairy. It's like, how the Western people have typecasted us Indians in their, comedy per se, in their, movies. The head bobbing and that, all of that. Now, if we are also doing to Africa what the Europeans did to us, then it is definitely weakening the whole passage. Option Z. Very few mainstream English language novels have historically been set in America and European metropolitan centers. The point is, English language novels, the author's accusation is that English language novels have always been set in Paris or New York, or in the Western country, or in US or Europe. If this is true, if C were true, if very few of them have depicted, novels in Western world, then everything that the author has said is just crumbling down. It's absolutely wrong, and that is absolutely not the answer. D. It's not the answer because it weakens. D. The depiction of Africa in most Indian Ocean novels is driven by a post-colonial nostalgia for an idyllic past. Again, I want to put Africa in a positive tone. I want to depict Africa in a tone which says Africa is important. It had played an important role in history. But if I'm depicting Africa as a nostalgic thing, great times, Africa was amazing, lush green forests, I was there, it was a happy place. No, we're not talking about Africa being a nostalgia-laden idyllic past. Idyllic is pleasant, very serene, beautiful. It's not giving Africa the importance it deserves, like the author is saying. So it is also weakening. So what are we left with? We are left with option A. A says Mainstream English language novels have historically privileged the Christian white male experience. This is strengthening. It's not weakening, it is strengthening, and hence that is the answer. And hence that is the answer. So, this was, well, not a very difficult RC. It was interesting. You might not be used to reading such passages. So all you need to learn about is that you have to focus on practicing. Focus on reading more of these. All right. So that's the RC for today. Please go through the PDF, solve the other question as well. And if you have any queries, please comment in the comment box and I'll get back to you either through the comments or through another video. Thank you. All the very best. I'll catch you again. Bye-bye. Adios.